This is the Ivy League Hoops Hour, where we cover all things men's basketball in the Ancient Eight. We are your hub, your go-to, your day one. But not really, though. I'm your co-host, Coach Sidney Johnson, former head coach of the Princeton Tigers from 2007 to 2011, and former three-time captain of the Tigers in 95, 96, and 97. And I am joined by my co-host, Princeton alum and former Princeton graduate assistant coach, Lawrence L-Boogie Schuler. Lawrence, how you making out?
As usual, Coach, I've got a bad case of the flop sweats, but otherwise feeling great.
Haha, okay. We'll delve deeper into that, or maybe not. Each and every week, we're going to cover basketball back and forth in the Ivy League, as you know, and you are more than welcome to join us, offer suggested topics, guests, comments, feedback, all of the above. Please email us at ivyleaguehoopshour@gmail.com. We love to hear from you and interact. This week, we tackle the topic of pace of play versus the control of a college basketball game and what coaches try to do in terms of bringing those two concepts together. We also have My Eyes Don't Lie to Me, the weekly segment where we look at the games, teams, and players of the week in the Ancient Eight. And we have an amazing guest, a former supervisor of officials for the Ivy League, Reggie Greenwood, 30 years of experience in college basketball on the court, and now mentoring the up-and-coming officials throughout the college basketball game. He brings wonderful insight and color to the discussion of all things basketball in the Ancient Eight. Let's get started.
Coach, a friend of mine the other day asked me, can you ever control a game and keep control of it by playing as fast as Cornell does and having the shortest possessions in college basketball?
Yeah, that's a good one, Lawrence. I would say, let me answer as quickly as Cornell might. No, that's my humble opinion. You know, I've watched Cornell so much and have loved every minute of it. It's just, not only are they scoring, but they're doing it highly efficiently, as we've talked about already. And I've watched all the other teams as well. So this has been a labor of love, continues to be. And Cornell especially sticks out as a fun team to watch from the offensive end. But I worry, I get concerned a bit as I'm kind of trying to do profiles and trends on the different teams as I look at Cornell, and I wonder if that offensive efficiency dips, if somehow, some way, they're turning it over a little bit more, or that shooting doesn't hold and they don't yield as many points as they currently are, but they continue to play that fast. They're essentially giving the ball back to their opponent so much quicker, just by the fact that they're getting up a shot in 4 to 5 seconds. And as a coach, you know, and as a player, there's a way to win the game. And on some aspect, it's about getting the game under control, having it in your hands, and everybody wants the ball. If you're constantly giving it back, and again, not adding to your tally on the scoreboard, I struggle to think that you can control every game week in and week out. So I'd love to hear what you would say, Lawrence, but in the league, I'm really curious, and I would say somewhat doubtful that this pace that Cornell has is one that can help them dictate and control the game throughout Ancient Eight play.
So in other words, you're questioning whether Cornell is really that good.
Why do you say it that way?
Well, the counter argument is playing quickly got them the lead. Can playing quickly not extend the lead, as opposed to what's, I guess, concerning you in the back of your mind, choking it away?
That's a good counterpoint. What I would say is this: it's not whether Cornell is good in my mind. It's, is this style of play able to be good for the entirety of a season and in, I would say, under different conditions, which is league play, where you're scouted more, people understand your third, fourth, fifth option, and things just get harder. So good counterpoint, but it's not necessarily that I'm pointing the finger at Cornell Big Red. I'm just saying there's something that changes when you get into league play, and that's that people are more prepared for what you've shown the entire country for your first 10 to 12 non-conference games. And so your style, will it uphold its level of efficiency? And then if it doesn't, and that's what makes, again, Cornell so good right now, they have been highly efficient playing at this pace for a long time. But if, and dare I say, when that dips in conference play, you could be digging yourself a larger hole versus right now what you're doing sometimes is going on some of those 8-0 runs that are separating you from your non-conference opponents. Does that make sense?
Oh, of course. Of course.
If you're looking at teams that are efficient offensively, you're never going to get an argument from me as to whether they're good or whether that'll hold up. But what I would say is if there is a dip in offensive efficiency when you go into league play, which there likely will be. Now, I don't have numbers on that per se, but let's watch it closely. You know, in the league, it's just tougher because people are better prepared. So if there's a dip in your offensive efficiency and coupled with that, this is the point that I'm trying to nail. Coupled with that, your offensive possessions are continue to be very short, then what is happening is you're constantly giving the ball back to your opponent by way of shooting and not making. And presumably they may be able to come down and get a return on that. And if that continues to happen, I'm just arguing that the hole that you're digging for yourself gets deeper and deeper, quicker and quicker. And in terms of control of the game, sometimes you can be up 9 with 5 minutes to go and say, hey, we're going to run some clock and then still get our highly efficient shot, instead of being up 9 and at 4:48, you're down 2 because you've come down, jack, they come down, score, and it's just a different game. So it's a control thing that I'm trying to capture, that I'm doubting and wondering if that can take place or take hold in the Ivy League once Cornell gets there.
So in hindsight, Loyola Marymount in 1990, were they able to keep control of the game?
That's a good question. And I think I'm a little bit on an island here by myself, in that control of the game is a bit of a coaching misnomer. You know, it's all in your head and it's mental. And did their coach think that they were ever in control? I don't know. I would imagine so, because they were supremely confident and committed to what they did, and they would do it against every single team. And maybe Cornell is in that same boat. Listen, I love to play fast and certainly adopted that at Princeton and then accelerated that even more at Fairfield. But as you mentioned, time and situation, it was never removed from how we needed to win a game and close out a game. And I'll say it, keep control of the game if we could. And it's a mental thing where you just want that lead that you have and own to marinate a bit in your opponent's mind and have it take a psychological impact on them to the point where they may wane in their confidence of what they're doing. But if you can kind of keep doing what you're doing, like a Loyola Marymount or a Cornell, and everything else doesn't matter, then I guess have at it. Is L-Boogie spot on? Is Coach Johnson way off the mark? Well, we have a veteran college basketball official on the show this week, so it won't be the first time I'm told that I'm off the mark. But either way, folks, please let us know what you think of pace of play versus keeping control of the game. And write into us at ivyleaguehoopshour@gmail.com. Can't wait to hear what you think. Now, let's get back to the show. We are now at our weekly segment of My Eyes Don't Lie to Me, where we look at the past week's games, teams, players of the week in the Ancient Eight. And unlike last week there were 7 of the 8 Ivy League teams in play on Wednesday. But this week, between Sunday to Wednesday, there were actually 10 different games of Ivy League teams competing. So a little bit more spread out and honestly, a little bit more digestible for me and Lawrence. And Lawrence, just in terms of your game of the week, which one did you have circled?
My game of the week was Princeton and Bucknell. Princeton showed a lot of firepower in the first half, 45 points. They withstood a Bucknell run, and in the end, Bucknell just couldn't keep up. Princeton put up 82 points, and 8 players played at least 10 minutes. We saw great play out of the 2 centers, Tosin Owoma, who scored 16 in 20 minutes, and Mason Hooks, who put a dream shake on a guy.
Well, Princeton's looking really good, and they continue to play very well. But I'm going to bring my game of the week into the picture, Lawrence. I'm going to go with Merrimack at Brown. Merrimack actually is a Division II team. They were 3 years ago, and 2 years ago under Joe Gallo, they actually won the NEC regular season championship. So they just came hot on the scene in Division I. Well, the Brown Bears hosted Merrimack just the other day and dispatched them pretty handily. They were up 16 points at the half versus Merrimack. Brown had 4 players finish in double figures, and they cruised to a 76-56 win. Lawrence, they also racked up their 4th straight victory. So well done by the Bears. In terms of our player of the week, I think we're both going with Tosin Owoma. I would pencil him in as a first-team All-Ivy pick and potential player of the year candidate. He's leading the league in assists, if you can imagine that, 6'8", long and just smooth and silky. But he's also averaging top 10 averages in points and rebounds, 27 points, a career high versus Drexel. And then he went for 16.6 rebounds, 5 assists in that game you mentioned versus Bucknell. Let's go with our team of the week, and that is the Brown Bears, who host the league's best defense. They are holding teams to 0.928 points per possession, roughly about 90th best in the country. By comparison, Lawrence, Yale and Harvard are coming somewhere in about the 150s in terms of their points per possession defense, and nobody else in the league ranks in the top 200. So it's going to be interesting to see these high-powered offenses, Cornell, Princeton, Dartmouth playing efficiently offensively, but how are they going to deal with the stout defense of the Brown Bears? So our games of the week, Lawrence going with Princeton versus Bucknell. I'm going with Merrimack at Brown. We share the player of the week in terms of Tosin Owoma, the point forward extraordinaire for the Tigers, and the team of the week, the Brown Bears, who've rattled off 4 straight wins. And that'll bring a close to our segment, My Eyes Don't Lie to Me. Up next, our interview with Reggie Greenwood. We're at the guest segment of the Ivy League Hoops Hour, and this guest is an esteemed gentleman who has over 30 years of experience as a college basketball official. And his time on the court, folks, not only included officiating the 2005 Final Four semifinal game, but countless games in the ACC, the Big East, the Big Ten, and a host of mid-major conferences, obviously including the Ivy League. He's a member of the CIAA Officials Hall of Fame. The CIAA is a Division II conference, mostly HBCUs located in the East Coast, and he currently serves as their supervisor of officials. And that role, the coordinator of officials role, if you will, is also one that our guest previously filled in the Ivy League back in 2009. So we're thrilled, absolutely thrilled to have none other than Reggie Greenwood. Reggie, how you making out?
Let me tell you something. If I was any better, I'd be you.
Okay. So you always got those one-liners. You would always get me at the start of games. Something like that would loosen me up and let me relax. And you just did it again in an interview.
Not a problem.
Well, Reggie, we want to jump right into it. I've got my co-host here, Lawrence L-Boogie Schuler, with me. And the first thing I want to take a stab at is, how does one even become a college basketball official?
Obviously, all of us have a love for the game of basketball, whether it's in any capacity, whether it's administrative, whether it's coaching, whether it's being a player, and certainly referees have that same passion. And when you're trying to be an official, you start out, maybe you were playing the game and you really liked it, and you thought, okay, what's the next phase? Because you're not going to play forever. It's not a natural or normal transition to go from a player or a part of the game to be an official, but you kind of have to make that transition in your mind that hey, I want to try this. You start out, generally speaking, at the high school level, and then from there to the JUCO, Division 2 and 3, and then and really the only realistic way of getting into the higher upper echelons of basketball officiating is through the camps. Word of mouth just doesn't quite get it there. You have to go to these camps. You've been to a lot of these camps. You've seen these referees coming up, and so they go there. They get the instruction. They get seen. They put their wares on the table, and if they're good enough, the particular leagues that are interested will hire them. And obviously, you don't go from high school to be in the championship game of the Final Four. So there's a lot of bumps along the way. But that's kind of how you transition from the attitude of playing to actually getting involved. I was fortunate because I came up through the Washington, D.C. programs, the local IBO, which is the International Association of Approved Basketball Officials, came up through some really talented clinicians. And also, how competitive basketball is in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
So if you can work that level of officiating, then you're going to get noticed, especially if you're pretty decent. But that's generally how you go from wanting to do it to learning how to do it and do it right. The one thing you didn't mention was the fact that you had to learn the rules and now not be a participant in terms of a watcher of the game, but an enforcer of the rules and mechanics of the game. And that's a difficult transition.
Reggie, what makes a good official? I mean, you're the best of the best. And so we got to tap into that knowledge in terms of when were you at your best and when do you see it in others as you're watching them perform and trying to bring them up through the ranks?
There's a certain level of, I guess what you might call a spark that you see in somebody that says, oh, this person has a potential, and clearly that potential has to be developed. In me, I think I always had the attitude, the ego to say, I'm going to be the best. And you have to be able to see that in, as I've done over the years as a clinician at camps, as a supervisor for not only the Ivy League and the Patriot League and the CIAA, but for one of the toughest leagues that was in the nation from 2013 to 2016, which was the Atlantic 10. The Atlantic 10 competitively had 18 schools at the time, and trying to find decent level officials that you could bring up through that process was a major challenge. But, I involved myself in a number of camps that had high caliber play in terms of the high school athletes. I was part of the NBA Top 100 camp that was down in Charlottesville, and was, before that they were down in VCU, and so you bring people into those kinds of situations where you have some of the highest level talent, and you see if they can referee that, and if they can, some of those kids are actually at some point may even be in the NBA. So if you got referees that can officiate and survive that, then they may have potential.
Right. Right. Excellent. Hey, some of our listeners might not know of the camps that you're talking about. And I want to touch on that because, I'm being real with you, is seeing you in that environment in the summer, catching up with guys that have a tremendous amount of respect, a DJ Cartenson, Clarence Armstrong, yourself. These are guys that I really like, but you were even able to connect more coaches and officials in those moments. So it was fun for me, but can you bring our listeners into exactly what those camps are and just explain to them so they know what you're referring to?
Yeah, the camps are typically your AAU type camps, these competitive camps that they have, these camps where the coaches can go and view during the open season the top quality players. You see them at the NBA top 100 at one point. I ran that for about 12 years.
Yeah.
But you also see them at the Vegas tournament. You see them at the hoop group tournaments. You see them in Atlantic City.
And so, Reggie, these are all like the AAU events that us college coaches are going to recruit. But then alongside that, you guys put in place, and I'll let you jump in, these camps going along with them at the same time.
Exactly. And what I do, and maybe some of the other supervisors don't do this, which I think is kind of a loss on their part. But what I do is I bring campers into that situation for 3 days. Usually the 2 days is when we actually have play, but the first day is all classroom. And all classroom means rules, mechanics, higher level philosophy, situational plays, video, all of those things get broken down in a full day. And I'm telling you, it's a full day from 7:30 till about 6 o'clock in the evening. And then they break for the evening. And then the next day, everything that we talked about, my expectation is you're going to be able to put that into practice and go out there and work the games that we assign you. And I have top level clinicians that work with me that generally are guys like you mentioned that are there to help me to determine and to assist those campers in getting their game to a position or to a place where they can be effective and potentially audition for a spot on my roster.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Having seen now, whether it's the camp environment or let's go back, the college basketball games in the Big East and the ACC, and you're working all these games and you're on the court, you have seen an incredible amount of growth in the game and how it's played. The rules, the physicality, the styles, not to mention, obviously, big time personalities that you've gotten to know over the years. But how do you think now today, 2021, how do you think the game is being played and coached? What are your thoughts on it? Just as a fan with so much knowledge of what you've seen it being played over the years.
The game has transitioned a little, and I think expectations in terms of administration of games as well as fan expectations and appreciation, as well as the players themselves, the athletes. The athletes are pretty good. I mean, yes, we had some star athletes back in the day. You were one of them, and certainly, I think that the athletic talent is at a different level. The one thing that I've seen that isn't a trend that I think should continue is the inability for the players to score on mid-range and short-range jumpers. You see a lot of threes and spectacular dunks going to the basket. And I think it's akin to how the game is played at the NBA level and at the Power 5 level. The Ivy League and the leagues at the lower levels don't quite play that way. And if you say you have a superstar, you may have one or two superstars on a team. When you go to the top 5 or top 6 conferences, you've got superstars just about at every position. So there's a difference in how the game is played, how the game is officiated. Not that it's not by rule, but it's just the athletic abilities of those kids at that level is a little bit different.
Right.
Personally, for me, I'd like to see the game to get back to a little bit more basics. One of the coaches that still plays a more basic scheme of things is Coach Boeheim there at Syracuse. And he hasn't changed. His game hasn't changed, but he's still a winner. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Reggie, you talk about changes in the game, and I got to let you know I've got an axe to grind.
And
it's about the replay reviews.
Mm-hmm.
I think the replay reviews, they say more about the players and the coaches and the fans than they do about the officials. First of all, I think the record shows that the officials almost always get it right when they make the initial call.
Exactly.
And I think looking back over the years, we have to recognize that.
Well, there's a couple of things with replay. Obviously, back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, it was not necessarily referees had to sell a play. You had to see the play all the way through, and you had to be able to determine whether a violation or a foul or whatever had occurred. And like you said, we were pretty much correct on all those interpretations, including timing situations. Did it get the shot off in time? There were occasions when we didn't get it right, and it was a split-second decision, did he or didn't he? And everybody says, "All right, just flip a coin." But having been in those situations and having learned the tools of the trade on how to officiate those types of situations, and you find that the referees did get it right most of the time. The times where the video comes into play is when those times when it's not accurate and something happens and you miss it. And that takes the human element out of it. And I'm going to use a Princeton word, juxtapose the reality of the world that we live in now, which is everybody can pick apart when they can slow-mo and take a look at it. And, with millions of folks at home and cameras showing 15 different angles of the same play, and you have to make a split-second decision on the floor, everybody's holding your feet to the fire and say, you better get it right.
Yeah.
And so that has caused a real schism in the first part of your analogy. And that is, we used to get those plays right all the time. And now those few times when you don't, and now you see the same things happening in football, in the NBA and the NFL, they're going to replay. And the replay is either upholding or overruling the play as it was on the field. And so you get this reluctance now of officials to kind of stick their nose in some mess and say, we have the ability to go to the monitor. Let's just make a call and go to the monitor and fix it.
Absolutely. And to your point, it seems like now everyone wants to relitigate the issue or have their right of appeal every time a referee makes a call. And it's gotten to the point now where at first we were clamoring to get replay introduced into the game, and now we're complaining every time the referee goes to the monitor.
I've worked on the rules committee for a number of years when I was a supervisor official for the Atlantic 10, Ivy League, and Patriot League. And one of the things that there was a huge reluctance in the rules committee makeup itself to not introduce any more situations that the officials could go to the monitor for. But these were plays and rules that were so conflicted that it ended up that you have to go. If you don't go, you get crucified on in the stage of public opinion. And we're talking fans now, and fans are short for what? Fanatics. So when you have to live in that environment and you're trying to put together a cohesive plan of attack or how you're going to adjudicate these plays and get them right, you have to be able to say, well, wait a minute. If you have the ability to go to the monitor, and let's say we don't want to drag it out, but you got to be able to get it right. There was a play in a couple of years ago in the NCAA tournament where it was going to determine whether a team went to the Final Four or not. It took 9 minutes to get the play right. There were several aspects of the play. It was a three-pointer or it wasn't a three-pointer. Did he get fouled before the release of the ball and the time running out? It was huge. And you have to stay there at that monitor and get every possible angle to get that play right to determine who's going to go to the Final Four or not.
Yeah, that's pressure. I mean, that's pressure like you wouldn't believe. Keeping our streak of listener interaction alive and well, our interview with Reggie Greenwood, one of the most well-regarded college basketball officials in recent memory, came to us from a suggestion from one of our listeners. So you could be next in terms of seeing your suggested topic, question, or a guest you might have in mind in our next pod episode. Just send an email to ivyleaguehoopshour@gmail.com, and Lawrence and I are happy to look over it. Now let's get back to our interview with the one and only Reggie Greenwood. Let's stay in this mode, this zone. I mean, there's much maligned is kind of what I would say in terms of how officials are viewed generally. And Reggie, I'm just being real. I've got young kids of my own that are doing sports left and right, and I'm loving it. But there is not, in the history of competitive sports, okay, whether it's biddy ball, middle school, prep school, college, pro, at any level, when someone goes to some kind of sporting event, it is without fail that someone's going to say something negative about the officiating. I
Well,
mean, you know what I mean? I mean, undefeated.
From the defensive side of the officiating, obviously, you are going into an environment when you go to referee a game, and I'll give you a classic example. I was in Syracuse, and they were playing Villanova, and there was 33,000 people in there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can bet every one of those 33,000 people were saying, they hated officials. They wanted every call. And it was so deafening in there that every play, your ears, you could literally feel your eardrums vibrate. And so when you say you can't even hear yourself think,
right.
that is a crazy analogy, but it is absolutely true. But the point is, you have to go in and be determined that your focus is so great that if there's a block charge call on one play, and 30 seconds later, it's the same call, same play, and against the same team, you have to be strong enough to stand up to the pressure and say it's a block or charge, whatever it is, and literally take the abuse that you're going to get.
Right.
And that's the sign of a really good official, in my opinion.
Yeah, excellent. I think that it sums it up in terms of the challenge. The challenge that we don't get is a steeled reliance and commitment to just getting the play right, no matter who it affects. Is that fair to say?
I would say that is absolutely correct. And when I got hired as the Ivy League coordinator, the interviewer asked me, he says, Reg, he said, how can we find our officials to be like you? And I kind of laughed a little bit, because I was like, well, wow, that's a heck of a compliment,
Right.
But, and as uniqueness goes, there's only one of me. But my response to them was, look, I will take all of the knowledge and the training and skill and expertise that I have and try to instill that in all of the people that I have jurisdiction over, to see that we can come to that same commonality in terms of how we're going to adjudicate and officiate the games. We have to get to a point where we walk into arena, home or away, we don't care who wins.
Right.
And I think sometimes the fans, going back to the fans, they think that you care who wins. You have some skin in the game, and you don't. And I'll give you another example. In one of the years when I was in the Big East in particular, 54% of the visiting teams won.
Yeah.
In one season. Now, that statistic is telling in the sense that if you could go, and any coach wants to be able to go, play, and compete and win on the road.
No doubt.
Okay, they want to have the feeling of the sense that when they walk out on the floor, see the three officials, they're like, okay, I don't have to worry about the officials tonight. Just play our game.
Right.
And that's the thing. As a referee, as a supervisor, that is a huge compliment to how you're doing your business.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Although you don't have skin in the game in terms of the final result and who wins and loses, you've seen so much, Reggie. So I have to ask you before we let you get out of here, there's the shortening of the shot clock down to 30. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of talk about, in terms of the men's game, should we be going to quarters, stay halves, and what's the uniqueness of the college game relative, folks, to all these other styles of play that look very similar: women's basketball, FIBA, NBA, high school, in terms of quarters and things like that. Where do you come out on it? And I especially really do, somewhat of a loaded question, is definitely want to get your thoughts on the shortening of the shot clock and its influence on the diversity of styles of play, where I think when you go down to 30 and maybe even 24, Reggie, it's get it across half court and set a ball screen. I mean, that's exactly pretty much what you're going to be seeing.
And you see that pattern in the NBA. I mean, when they're down to 24, they got 8 seconds to get it up to court, to get in the front court. Okay, and then now you're down to 14. And like you said, you're running one option. And what do? They spread the floor and they go big on small and move the ball. And somebody who's open at the end of 5 seconds got to take a shot.
Right.
And let me put it to you this way. I don't think at every level of college basketball that we have the ability to do that. You look at the level of play, the style of play, which
Mm-hmm.
is important, okay, and say that you can impact the game in that kind of a way. Why? Why would you do that? Just to join the pack? You mentioned all the other types of teams, team types that are doing that, the
Right.
NBA, the women, the FIBA. Has it improved the game at all for them? No, in my opinion.
Right.
So why would we do that? Okay, you talking about style of play? One of the greatest variances in terms of style of play was the Ivy League.
Right.
And, and I'm not saying it just because of you, but the Princeton style offense. And the Princeton style, go back to Petey Carrill, they would run the ball, move it around, 45 seconds. They could move teams out of position. And by the time you turn around, you got a backdoor cut,
Yeah.
right? You don't see that anymore. You can't. Okay. So has it had an impact? Absolutely. Has it changed the fundamental way that the Ivies play basketball? Well, they're now joining the fray and run and gun, and that's pretty much what I see. And and maybe I'm being a little old fashioned and a little bit pointed, but that's what I see. And I don't know if that's better for the game or not. Moving the shot clock to 24 is not beneficial. Taking it down to 30, I thought killed the Princeton style in college basketball.
Yeah.
So is that improvement? Is that change? It's out of my hands, out of my control in terms of I can only voice my opinion. And I think, there were times when I would come and visit your team and I would say, hey, what do you think about this rule change?
Right.
And you would say, I don't think it's good. And I said, well, you need to get to the NABC and tell them, because otherwise, I mean, you go to this whole emphasis on this flop last year. And that's, to me, is garbage. Call a block, or ignore it. Or if they're doing it, call a technical foul, move on.
Right. Yeah. No, that was great advice. And I was able to get on the NCAA rules committee and had some input on things that were like common sense types of application to the rule that I think you're talking about. The thing that I would say is, it is just your opinion, but your opinion is a lot more informed than me and mine, or me and Lawrence has put together. So that's why we had you on the show, and so indebted for you to take the time. But before we let you go, Reggie, there's just always looking forward is what we always pose to our guests before they leave us. Again, with that wide lens of just your knowledge, you're still obviously so close to the game and seeing so many games. What do you want? It could be specific to the Ivy League. It could be to the CIAA, which you're working with now, any style of basketball or coaching or officiating. But what would you love to see for the game moving forward?
I really would like to see more, and not necessarily for CIAA, but more minority participation in the game.
Yeah.
The convergence of these complicated allegiances and alliances. You see some of the smaller leagues being absorbed into an alliance like the ACC, the Big East, the Colonial, the Atlantic 10, whatever. And I'm not necessarily a person that complains about race or whatever, but I have seen a noted trend in the drop of the number of minority officials that now that these consortiums have come together, that we are losing ground. And I find that is really disheartening because, I call it the isms, nepotism, cronyism, favoritism, where certain people are getting advantages and others are not. And maybe that's my soapbox right now. And you asked me, so I put it out there.
No. And Reggie, staying there, is it that these consortiums, they have a more narrow lens in terms of who they're looking at and who they're considering? Is that what has brought us to this point?
It's not a stated policy, but it's the effect. What you see is what you get, WYSIWYG. And when you look out there and you don't see minorities and you don't see them in high level important games, and you don't see them even to the extent of going to the NCAA tournaments, especially not at the 16, 8 and 4 level, you got to be scratching your head. And another example is that even at the higher echelons, the commissioners of leagues, the rules committee, all of those things, and there's the representation is not quite reminiscent of the people that are actually playing in the games.
Right, right. Well, the diversity that we embrace has only enriched us, but if that fades, then we're in trouble. And so, with that in mind, we would hope that the social justice conversation that continues to go on in this country, certainly has always been rooted in sports. And why wouldn't it look at the quality and desire of minority officials who want to get in the game and represent? And I'm sure you would be the perfect one to talk to. So we may be circling back to you, Reggie, to have that conversation and others if you're open to joining us again.
I am so inclined, and certainly I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak about, the Ivies in particular, because that's been a passion of mine for a long time. Some great coaches, going all the way back to Pete Carrill and JT3, yourself. I mean, coaches that were at Cornell and Harvard, and and even modern day, I still stay in touch with Coach Amaker and James Jones at Yale. And so it was never really, for me, us against them kind of a field, because I wanted to negate that as best I could, so that they could see that we're human too, and we make mistakes, and we got to process that and move on.
Yeah, that's why you're my guy, because you brought a human side to it, a realness and an honesty and a joy to the game, and that's why you always be my guy, Reggie. We'll work to have you back, but for now, we thank you for joining us on the Ivy League Hoops Hour. Thanks so much, Reg. Take care.
Thanks, Sydney. You have a great holiday and be safe out there.
Joe DeRosa. Do you want to talk about UCF?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, not at all. I mean, what do you just go with it? Just go.
So at some point in the second half, two players collide, and they collide into the referee, Joe DeRosa, who goes face down. He's on the ground, and we're mildly concerned that he's concussed or something. And he gets up and awards possession to the other team. And we're like, what's going on?
How did that happen?
And yeah, I all I remember is him saying, "You're going to say that to me?" I don't know what you said to him, but
Yeah.
I think it's clear as day. I saw him on TV, and I said, "That's that guy."
Yeah. I was like, how did that happen? Like, that's not their ball. It's our ball. Something along those lines, without any colorful language, Boogie, I promise. And he was like, thank you. I'm doing okay. Like he was pissed at me for not checking in on him. Meanwhile, he got the call wrong. So I was like, and I honestly, Lawrence, I didn't see him go down that hard, although I did see him go down. I'm not going to lie about that. But I was like, yo, man, you got the call wrong. And he gave me attitude for not checking in on him. So, and I, to this day, I'll shake his hand and throw my hands up. But I do remember him not being all right with me.
He was a little salty.
Yeah, he gave me a look. He definitely gave me a look.
Our next segment we're going to call Get Some Facts and Come Back and See Me.
Get some facts and come back and see me. Get some facts and come back and see me.
Get Some Facts and Come Back and See Me, named after the legendary, if not infamous, press conference from UConn coach Jim Calhoun. The myth we're going to address in this edition is pace of play.
Yeah, let's get at it, Lawrence. I mean, pace of play, we all want to see fun, electric, potent offense, get up and down, da-da-da-da-da-da. It's easy on the eyes. We've mentioned that before, but there's a misconception that that's actually a winning style of basketball, or that it leads to winning. Of the 9 undefeated teams in Division I basketball right now, only 2 of them actually rank in the top 50 in terms of possessions per game and essentially the speed at which they're playing. So it's not that you necessarily play fast and win games. And I think fans think this sometimes, and certainly the TV media tries to pump that up. The frustration I have sometimes, Lawrence, is, There'll be a game that's played in the high 50s, low 60s. That's a high major game. And you'll never hear any of the TV folks talking about how slow the game was or how inefficiently, to be honest, on the offensive end, it's played. But it seems that's a tag that is put on mid-major. It's certainly a tag that's put on the Ivy League, which, full transparency is why I call to attention how fast and efficiently Cornell is playing, because it's wonderful basketball. It's not throwing it all out of bounds and all over the place. And guess what? They're winning games. But that's not always true. And so let's dispel that myth. That pace of play and the speed at which you play leads directly to wins. It doesn't always look that way.
Before we go, we want to give our non-Ivy nod of the week. This week it goes to Jacob Gilliard from the Richmond Spiders. He set the NCAA record for career steals, 386 and counting.
That's really impressive, Lawrence. Sticky defense from Jacob Gilliard as the Richmond Spiders continue to roll. Now let's spread some love throughout the Ivy League in terms of other athletic teams, not basketball. And I'm looking at you, Joshua Ogunsanya, a Columbia wrestler, a sophomore now in his second year at the university, and he has emerged as a top 25 wrestler in the country. He joins 3 other Lions as they are ranked nationally for wrestling in the top 25. So well done, Joshua. Now, Lawrence, let's pivot back to all things men's basketball in the Ancient Eight. What games do we have coming up?
On Saturday, Princeton travels to Lafayette, BU travels to Dartmouth, Columbia visits Albany, and in Big 5 action, Penn plays LaSalle. And on Sunday, Yale travels to Rick Pitino and the Iona Gales.
That does it for us this week on the Ivy League Hoops Hour. Don't ever forget, any kind of questions, comments, feedback, suggested topics, guests, send us your emails at ivyleaguehoops@gmail.com, and we'll love to address them and work them into the show. A full pack show this week, and we appreciate Reggie Greenwood coming on and your attention, as always, to all things men's basketball in the Ancient Eight. We'll see you next week.
Get some facts and come back and see me. Get some facts and come back and see me. Don't throw out salaries or other things. Get some facts and come back and see me. We turn over $12 million to the University of Connecticut, which is state-run. Next question.